Hello everyone.
Hi.
Morning.
And welcome to this week's Facebook Live. I'm joined by Alex from the features team and Alan from the fiction team.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about novels based on true stories, or fact versus fiction, really. Kind of inspired by a couple of us have been watching Chernobyl, the series that obviously dramatizes the nuclear disaster in the 80s, and it's based on a true story, but there's a character in that who at the end of the show, I'm not giving anything away if you're intending to watch it, but it turns out that she is a composite character of I think 200 people, or like a really large number of people. They've kind of combined all these people into one because it's more expedient for television. But that kind of got me thinking, you know, how do the families of these 200 scientists feel that they were all crammed into one character, because they're then not kind of getting the credit, I guess, that they deserve for the role that they played in it. So it got me thinking about whether or not novels or television shows or movies based on true stories have these kind of pitfalls where you're not really certain, you know, is what you're watching actually what happened, or is it a director's vision of what happened? You've watched Chernobyl, Alex, so...
I did, yeah. I wonder, yeah, that's a good point, actually. I wonder how the family felt about that. I think, I don't know, I think a lot of people have been saying, a lot of people have been looking at it in the media saying, speaking to people that were in or near the incident when it happened and asking them how true it was. And most of them have said that it's fairly accurate. I think if they're sticking fairly true to the principle of it. There's one a little bit left field, but there was, when I watched the film about Eddie the Eagle, which is supposed to be his true life story, I later found out that most of the events in that film were actually completely fictionalized, which I think kind of undermines the idea of it a little bit. But I think if it's just staying true to the kind of spirit of what happened, yeah, okay, maybe it does, you know, downplay those characters, but I think it's probably still getting a really important story out there. There's still a lot of new stories coming out that people might not have heard before. I know it was slightly based on the book. I think it's called A Chernobyl Prayer or something. So they extracted a lot of accounts from that of real people that had been there at the time. I guess there's only so much you can do in a TV series, but it must be a really fine line for the producers to tread to make sure they're respecting all the people involved. Yeah. You know, but still trying to essentially turn it into a story. So.
I haven't watched it, but I'm looking forward to watching it after hearing, especially in the office, the rave reviews. But I suppose with something like that, it's a fine line between fact and entertainment. You know, just you still want to entertain people. And you mentioned Eddie the Eagle, and I was looking at a few things on Google, some fact-based films where there's, you know, some little bit dubious regards to how accurate they actually were. And one example was Braveheart. And apparently that was, at the time, that was just ripped. And even now, it's just ripped to shreds as regards to not being historically accurate.
They fight the Battle of Stirling Bridge without a bridge.
Without the bridge, yes.
Which is quite an impressive feat.
The timeline as well is very much not part of the history. And the Celts weren't born until later on as well. So and that was just 2 or 3 examples of. But again, I remember seeing the film, and I've seen it since. I really enjoyed it as a movie, and it's that fine line between entertainment and fact.
So I mean, that throws up the issue of what benefit are you getting from saying that you are based on a true story, or the way I think that some films get away with it now, and probably books as well, is saying inspired by a true story. What kind of weight are you lending your work that you feel like you need, especially if it's not really sticking to the events that you're portraying?
There was, I mean, I read an article online talking about how that was almost becoming a thing that you had to say, or would give sort of extra boost to your film or your TV series to be able to say that at the beginning. And it was, I don't know, it seems to be a lot of the new sort of Netflix series and BBC series using that as a gimmick to bring more people in, even if it's not necessarily totally accurate to the original story. I mean, I think it's still a great medium for bringing like untold stories to before, but I think sometimes when you find out that it can prompt you to then go and look a little bit more behind the scenes, which I imagine some people might ruin the enjoyment of it a little bit, that they haven't been told the whole true story or something. Especially for somebody like yourself who might be quite a fan of accuracy in these.
Yes, yeah. So it is a bit. I mean, I immediately after finishing Chernobyl, the television show, I then went online and started looking it all up, which I guess is a good thing about when these films and TV shows and books are based on true stories, because it may inspire you to go and read about the actual events. But coming across things that happened in the show that didn't happen in real life, you do get a bit kind of, what other things, what other kind of corners were you cutting to make a better television show? And it is a very good television show, so I can't really complain about it. But Alan, you were saying one that I didn't actually realise, Jaws.
Yeah, apparently Jaws is based on a true story as well. I think it was the early 1900s or something, but so I think it's 5 swimmers or something. They've been tackled by a shark, and there's only one survivor, and basically that inspired the guy Peter Benchley to write Jaws. So it's even like Hollywood epics, you know, they have that realism to them.
Yeah, the sort of grain of truth.
Yeah, and one example, I just looked at this one before I came in, was the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Robert Louis Stevenson. Apparently, I'll just read this out. It's based on a true story of William Brodie, an 18th century burglar who managed to fool his contemporaries into thinking he was a respectable man while leading a life of crime. Apparently, he's a deacon and a cabinet maker during the day. So obviously, he didn't turn into a monster, but I quite like the idea that it inspired Robert Louis Stevenson to show this guy with his
the two sides of his person. That also inspired a pub in Edinburgh called Deacon Brodie's. Which,
that's right. So yeah, that was really quite interesting.
Other pubs are available.
There are famous one, maybe Schindler's List. And was with the Holocaust and things. We've seen earlier, so insight into Oscar Schindler and how he saved over 1,000 Jews from the Holocaust. So,
it seems like there's a sort of. It seems like it's only fair to really keep a sort of respectful distance in terms of time after an event before you then fictionalize it for sort of the purposes of entertainment. But it does, and it's half informative, half entertainment anyway, really. But I think you do feel like that you've got to leave it really a certain amount of time before it's acceptable.
Yeah, because otherwise it's a bit sort of morbid to leap on it right away. Speaking of kind of Holocaust memoirs, because there is an awful lot of those, and memoir I guess is a different thing, because that's someone recalling something, and there could be inaccuracies in that through kind of no fault of their own, they may have forgotten it, or they may have the memory could have bridged the gap between things, which happens. They could have basically invented the memories themselves. It's not really their fault. But there's a book out at the moment called The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which my better half has recently completed. I did a wee bit of reading about the book because I thought it looked like an interesting one, and it turns out the author wrote this book, which is presented as a work of fiction based on a story told to her by a Holocaust survivor, and now the Holocaust survivor's son is suing the woman who wrote the book, saying that there are inaccuracies in the story. And her argument is entirely, I am writing this as a work of entertainment. It just happens to be based on the story that his father had told her. So that really blurs that line between which is which, because it does say it's based on a true story. And the chap's son's contention is very important bits of it are incorrect, therefore it can't be called a true story. But it kind of depends where you fall down.
I like it as a way of, I think more and more these days there's we talk about everything these days, you know. We're kind of much more open in society these days, and I like the fact that we're now really interested in these stories from the past of these pioneers and these people doing incredible things, and we can talk about stories of things that we couldn't talk about before, like the BBC's, I think it's still ongoing, this sort of current adaptation of Gentleman Jack, which has been going down really well. also did a brilliant thing about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, which was called Feud, which was I believe that was based on a book as well about their sort of really tempestuous relationship between the two actresses and stuff like that. And just these stories that you know, or Hidden Figures as well. I don't know if you guys watched Hidden Figures about the ladies in NASA.
No, but it's meant to be very good.
Yeah. I think it's a great medium for bringing out those sort of stories. And even if there are a few inaccuracies, but we're saying if it prompts people to go and do a bit of research, then it's great. It seems like a good time for these stories to be coming out, and more and more of them are. So.
Just watching them get sued.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I almost feel like they should carry a message saying, "Go away and read this," like a disclaimer that says some of this has been fictionalized. Another recent one was the Churchill film with Gary Oldman. Where they had fictionalized a couple of scenes entirely to kind of make him look like a slightly nicer person, because he was not a very nice guy. But they're trying to, obviously you have to root for him. And I read an article at the time by a historian who was saying there will now be people who think that Churchill was like this, and he wasn't. And that sort of thing can be a bit dangerous, because you can kind of convince a load of people based on something that they've sat in their living room and watched, or read on a train or whatever, that history was a certain way, and it wasn't necessarily true. Now, this is sort of obviously history as in a very seminal moment in British history in the war. This isn't just someone's recollections of something that happened then. So it can be a bit dangerous.
It's an interesting point, though, if you're going to talk about something like that. I mean, if you're going to bring up that kind of subject and start digging into history a little bit, should you do it if you're not going to tell the complete truth? I mean, I don't know. Things like Erin Brockovich, Malcolm X, King's Speech, all this kind of stuff, all of them had elements of slight sort of dramatization for the purposes of like entertainment. Should you bring it up if you're not going to just completely do it justice? I don't know. It's a weird, difficult one.
Yeah, I think you're always going to risk offending someone. That's the bottom line.
Or glamorizing criminals sometimes.
Yeah,
that's a good point. You guys remember Buster, Phil Collins?
Yeah.
Which, you know, I don't know.
There's plenty of movies about Billy the Kid. And there's plenty of books as well. And apparently, speaking of not very nice people, he was just a murderer. But there's this whole big thing about how he was this sort of romantic Wild West figure, and that was spawned. It wasn't spawned entirely by the movies, because contemporary newspaper reports kind of did it too. But it is presenting a false picture.
Was the film Young Guns?
Young Guns. Young Guns too.
And did you guys? I mean, obviously there were a lot of famous sort of Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway version of Bonnie and Clyde as well. And for a long time, they were glamorized as almost the sort of heroes of this story. Obviously robbing money during the sort of Great Depression and stuff like that. But then Netflix did a film recently, which I can't remember what it's called.
I'm trying to remember it now as well.
But it was a brilliant.
Costner and Woody Harrelson.
They did a great job. They didn't. It was a very deliberate.
Highwayman.
The Highwayman. It was a very deliberate attempt to not that Bonnie and Clyde were barely on screen in that story at all, and it was very much a look from the policeman's side, saying, "Look, these people did bad things. They really did. As a culture, we've glamorized it for." Going on 70, 80, 90 years or whatever, and maybe it's time we had a look at, the real facts of what happened. So
that's the only way to do it then, because if you basically film it or write it from the two characters' point of view, then they're going to be your heroes and heroines. So the reader or audience has to root for that. Those people. So the only way to do it is to change it over to the policeman. Whoever's point of view. But it's interesting.
It's kind of an ethical quandary if you're going to do it, because you want to tell. I mean, we shouldn't say that you can't tell historical stories, because there's quite a lot of interesting things that happened, and you want to talk about them. But you have to be, I guess, responsible.
The film Untouchables is obviously and Al Capone, and even though events in the story, loosely connected to those two people, but you still had Elliot, the good guy, against Al Capone, the bad guy.
I don't know if you guys, a recent film that did quite well in the cinema, The Green Book.
I've read about it, I've never seen it.
No, it's a story for anybody who hasn't seen it. It's the story of an Italian-American boxer from New York who ends up being the chauffeur for a concert pianist who happens to be black. He trained in Russia, a really high-level music school, and then he went on tour, but the tour included visiting Deep South. So he needed a driver that was kind of both a driver and sort of fairly security aware and able to handle himself. And I don't really know. The film ended with like so many of them do, ended with a number of sort of scenes of saying, this is what happened to this character, and this is what happened to this character. And there's quite a lot of that seemed to indicate that the film is fairly accurate through it. But what I haven't looked too deep into it, whether it kind of did completely tell the truth or not. What it obviously set out to achieve was something quite decent. That that there are no differences.
Yeah, there was a message.
Yeah. So I think if it's, if the intention of it is good, then maybe it's maybe that's not too much of a problem. I'm not sure. If you're changing a character from a good one to a bad one from history, then, or vice versa, then maybe people have a right to get upset about that. But if you're just
actually, I just want to say, if you guys want to tell us about your kind of favorite fact-based books or television shows, or ones where you've read it and you've thought, I've got a bit of a problem with that, or just please do in the comments, and we'll be really interested to hear from you. But on that note, we did a previous one of these, in fact the three of us, about films, and I mentioned one of my favorite films is Zulu, which was made in 1963, and in that film they have a character who is based on a real person, and his entire character is completely changed because they needed to have a sort of roguish guy. So there's a guy called Henry Hook, and in real life he was a Quaker who was a volunteer ambulance driver. He wasn't even really a soldier, and he had this sort of saintly reputation, and in the aftermath of the battle there were people saying how hard he worked, and he was basically a hero. He got the Victoria Cross. In the film, he is, at the time the film starts, he's malingering in the infirmary. He's ducking duty. He's a drunk. He bullies loads of people throughout the film, and he is basically he's a scoundrel. He's not. I would say he's not a bad character. He's a great character. But the real Henry Hook's family, to this day, their great grandchildren are still really quite upset. Because there was no real reason to do it, other than it made a better film. And I certainly grew up, when I was watching this when I was a kid, and the internet wasn't widely available, I grew up thinking that's what this character was like, and then you only find out kind of afterwards actually he was a completely different guy.
I wonder why they did that then, just make him a fictional character.
Why not just have someone completely different that can kind of take on that role if that's what you need.
Maybe that's where what they did in Chernobyl would have done quite well. If you want to create a certain, you need somebody to be that, and why take somebody real and do that to them? Why not just create somebody completely fictional?
That seems a tad unethical. When you're dealing with real subjects. I mean, obviously by 1963 they were all long dead, I think. But not long dead, maybe 15 years. There was a guy that definitely lived for a very long time, and was round about there. But so the other question I was going to ask, Alan, the fiction team, do we get an awful lot of historical fiction? Do we get any?
We do. We don't actually. We do obviously have them based around real events and things like that, but they tend to be off camera, if that makes sense. So
while something's happening elsewhere.
With kings and queens, they'll be there, but they'll be out of shot basically, and they'll be maybe spoken about, but they won't have a direct influence in the bearing of the story. So that's just the way we handle it. Obviously, you'll get the Wolf Hall. It's a good example, and obviously that's very much into
really into the intrigue.
So we would never do that, and so it's very much. Be part of the story and can lend itself to a particular period or whatever, but yeah,
not the main focus.
Yeah, not the main focus, and the characters are certainly more attention's drawn to them. We just feel it's just a friend way, and it's a sort of safer water to be on. You know,
maybe because of some of the issues that we've been speaking about here, that
and
you don't really want to get into that where someone might read it and say
people,
that's the line.
say if you come way back in time, people are long dead, but you still don't want to offend or cause offence in any shape or form. So it's getting the balance right as well, and I think if the writer, whoever, if it's a screenwriter or author, can get that balance right, then there's no reason why it should make for, at the end of the day, good entertainment. Which we are in.
Gives it a good sort of sense of context as well, doesn't it? If you're doing that in there. I think genuinely, I mean, obviously, working for the features team, I think facts can be as fascinating as fiction. So I just think there's just such an appetite for these great stories, and there's so many out there. There's so many. I mean, every week we're doing inspirational people. Almost every week we're doing inspirational people in the magazine. People setting up charities and telling the sort of all these kind of hidden histories are coming out about women that did amazing things, and just people all around the world whose stories haven't got out before. We're finding that there's just a really rich seam of that. I keep thinking that because of the weekly and the special, we produce quite a lot of features, and I keep thinking that at some point we might hit that. We might be, we might find that we're kind of running out of this sort of stuff, but we've been doing that for years and we still haven't. There's just so much.
You've got to trust your writers to do the research as well,
Yeah.
I think that's important, and just to draw attention to certain areas that maybe
that need attention drawn to them. Maybe people
Which is interesting. You're talking about the research isn't always an easy thing to do as well, because if I'm writing a feature on something historical, and you inevitably you do use Google. Wikipedia is always the first one that comes up, and you're never entirely sure how accurate that is. You do have to sort of, when you follow up on this research, when people are doing films, when people are reading about the events after they've seen a film, you really do have to kind of read around something a lot, because there's a lot of sort of quite contrary information out there on the internet as well that makes it quite tricky. But that happens. Some of my favorite films have done true stories. But
But always check your sources and double check, triple check.
Definitely. But
good advice. And I think we should probably end on that advice. Always triple check your sources. So as I say, if you guys want to, we'd love to have a conversation about this, because we could probably go on for a bit longer. So do let us know what your favorite kind of fact-inspired books are, or what your thoughts are on the kind of fact versus fiction debate. And we will see you next week. So thank you for joining us.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.